Alex, with the case of Venezuela, and it seems that in the United States, I don't know if you saw the latest polls, and CBS has reported that 70% of the American people are against the war in Venezuela, against Venezuela. And even we had Rand Paul talking about it. All the politicians, Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, she has resigned from her position. And how do you see the case of Venezuela? On the other hand, it seems to me that Donald Trump is putting this. Everybody's saying, that you're looking at the weapons, looking at the, bombers going to the region. You feel that the United States would attack Venezuela. On the other hand, Donald Trump says that he may consider talking with, Maduro. What is your understanding of what's going on toward Venezuela?
Okay, I'll share my understanding, even though I'm not sure that I'm right about this. But um, I think that it may be that Donald Trump is exerting pressure on Venezuela in the same way that he was building up pressure on Iran a few months ago. There was a time when, they were bringing all these aircraft carriers and strategic bombers to Diego Garcia and all this, and it looked like the United States was going to start a regime change war against Iran, but then it never happened. And so I think that maybe they're doing the same thing now for some reason. And I've always doubted that it's oil, because oil would be the obvious explanation. But if that's the reason for war, then, Trump would be wasting United States military assets, U.S. taxpayers' resources for basically something that would turn out to be a gift to Wall Street and the City of London. So if he ends up doing that, then I'll have to revise my position on Donald Trump. But it seems to me that maybe Maduro government at some point made a deal with the devil, and they've done certain things that are now being tackled in the United States. One thing that we know is that when the war started in Ukraine in 2022, the Biden administration, somebody there thought, well, we need oil, because with American frack, with the oil that you make from fracking, you don't get you can't extract jet fuel from that. You can't extract diesel for that. So for things like aircraft and tanks and heavy trucks, that oil is useless. But Venezuela has a heavy oil from which you can derive all those components. So Biden administration sent a delegation to Caracas, and they made a deal. And then we don't know exactly what the deal was, but they lifted a whole bunch of sanctions against Venezuela. And one part of that deal, and I'm completely speculating now, I don't know this, is that Biden, part of his administration's thing was to flood the United States with illegal immigration, and it seemed that they particularly liked the criminal element. So maybe part of that deal was, hey, why don't you empty your prisons and send those people to the United States? So that's where, the Trump administration might have a lot of beef against Maduro regime. And the other one is that it seems that Venezuela was part of the election rigging process in the United States. That there were servers and development developer teams sitting in Venezuela, as well as in Serbia, among other places, who apparently played a significant role in rigging the U.S. elections. Pretty sophisticated operations to make sure that the desired candidate wins. And I think that this is a guess again. maybe the reason for Trump to pile up all this pressure on the Maduro regime is to force them to cooperate, because maybe that's going to be another big inquiry that's going to be extremely damaging for the DNC, his political opponents at him. And so, maybe Maduro, to avoid war or to avoid suffering the same fate as Muammar Gaddafi, will have to deliver the goods. And if he does, well, that's another thing that might be as big as the anti-corruption investigations going on with respect to Ukraine.
I think the only point that connects Venezuela to Ukraine and to the case of the Middle East with Israel and Iran is Marco Rubio, Alex. What we've learned, because we were criticizing Witkoff for what he's doing in Ukraine with the case of negotiations with Iran, what we've learned recently, just two days ago, from the Iranian foreign minister, he said that we have reached an agreement 3 times with Steve Witkoff. And he communicated that with Washington, which, in my opinion, is Marco Rubio. Then he said that they don't agree with that. The same is happening with the case of Ukraine. If something happens in Venezuela, in my opinion, it's all about Rubio and his position and the way that he's pushing for.
Yes, I'm aware that is definitely part of the equation, but that's internal strife within the Trump administration. And at least on the subject of this 28-point deal with Ukraine, peace deal with Ukraine, it seems to me that Marco Rubio has been brought to heel. And I think that Rubio and Kellogg might be representing the losing side in this whole thing, because Kellogg's out. It seems to me that even the Epstein affair is also part of the equation. It's hard to connect the dots exactly, so you could confidently point to something. But you see that one of the dark lords of the city of London has fallen, being Lord Mandelson. I don't know if this is meaningful, but Prince Andrew has been stripped of. He's been turned into a private citizen. There's a lot going on, and I think that a lot of it is going on under the table. Like things that are not mentioned in press releases, in conferences for the media, things that are being done, gangster style. And of course, then there's going to be fifth columnists in any government, and Marco Rubio and Kellogg may well be those fifth columnists. But for me at the moment, working out the Venezuela thing is very complicated, because there's, I don't buy the drug dimension of it at all. It's not even, Venezuela would be number 10 on the list of problems if tackling drugs was the intent. Oil as collateral might be part of it, but I also don't think that's what it is. I think maybe it has to do with these illegal immigrants and the meddling in U.S. elections. We'll know, but I still believe that Trump will not go to war against Venezuela. I think that this is just piling pressure on Maduro regime to deliver whatever it is that Trump is trying to extract from him, because launching a war, there's all kinds of ways that it can go wrong, and I don't think Trump needs that in the run-up to the midterm elections, which are next year. Like a big giant fiasco in the Caribbean. I don't think he's going after that. So even if Rubio is pushing for regime change in Venezuela and then a regime change in Cuba and so forth, I very much doubt that Trump will pull the trigger on that, because I think there's too much downside for him and no upside practically. What's the upside? The upside is the collateral for Wall Street. It's not going to stop drug trafficking, because maybe some cocaine comes from Venezuela, but no fentanyl. If you wanted to tackle fentanyl, you have to you have to go to Canada, you have to go to Mexico, you have to attack the money laundering banks. That should be your number one priority in doing this, but they're not doing that. So it's something else. But I think time will tell. We'll know more with time. But the good thing is that a lot of people are doing a lot of good investigative work. So the picture will emerge.
Actually, Alex, I don't know if you heard Maduro talking about, the case of the drug. He said that 85% of these deals are done in the United States and within the system, the banking system of the United States.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. The whole drug cartel structure could not exist at all without the not only support but the full backing of the money laundering banks, because these Mexican drug cartels sell about $400 million worth of drugs per week, and it's all in cash. It's not, they don't issue you an invoice and then you pay with your credit card or debit card. It's all cash. And so they get about 400 million worth of cash per week. That, what do you do with that cash? You need a money laundering bank to put it clean into your bank accounts, because, then they end up buying helicopters and rocket propelled grenades, and they have submarines. They have all kinds of very, very sophisticated, expensive military grade hardware, the Mexican cartels. And you can't buy that with cash on pallets. You have to have clean bank accounts. And then, when you have to have clean bank accounts, somebody is an authorized signatory. Whereas, if you have just cash in warehouses, then any guy there that's charged with guarding the cash can say, hey, why don't we guys take this cash? Why do we have to, keep it for the boss? We can set up our own cartel and take this money. So that would be a magnet for, not just the lower hierarchy members of the cartel, but even law enforcement, military. They would want to get to that. If it's in the bank, you can't touch it. Only, El Chapo Guzman has the signature on this account, and his CFO. Well, that's the only people who can, deal with this money. So in that way, the bank practically anoints the leadership and the hierarchy of the cartel. Without the money laundering banks, they would splinter into 1,000 rival groups that would probably do most of the law enforcement between themselves, because they'd kill each other over all these piles of cash. And so the whole thing would go away. That's why you have to attack the banks. And I've listened a few months ago with an interview with a guy in Trump's FBI who was talking about very large, like industrial grade fentanyl labs in Canada. And he was saying that Canadian banks were part of the whole thing. So they understand the problem. Venezuela is not in the same category of problems. It's a different thing. And again, we'll know for sure with time. Maybe we won't know for sure, but it's not what's being talked about.